Hello everyone, and welcome to our third video in the Introduction to Programming portion. In this video we're going to be covering the cin, the cout, and the getline functions. These are used for console input and console output. So we've already covered a little bit of cout, but we're going to reiterate. So the requirements for the cout is you have to use the input-output stream library. So again, that's going to be #include and then the IO stream that is going to include this library. You also want to be using namespace standard, and that's so that we no longer have to do std::cout. We can just write cout. So just to reiterate everything that we've already covered on cout, just so it's fluid as we're moving forward. Cout is the console output. This is used to print back to the user, and the way that would look is cout and whatever you want to write. We're getting ready to use the cin and cout feature. And then you want to use your end line, but you don't have to. That's just if you want to have the next item come at the new line. So now we're getting into the new stuff. So this is our cin. Cin, again, uses the same thing. We have to use our input-output stream library. We want to utilize the using namespace standard. If we didn't use this, we would just have to use std::cin. And cin is console input. This is used to read items from the user. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in any order, but when you want the user to get any input, you need to utilize the cin function or the cin call to receive input from the console and save it to a variable. It would look like this. So first we have to create a variable that we want to be extracted from the user. It doesn't have to be a string, but in this case we want to grab a string because it's going to be their first name. So if I were to make this an integer, I cannot input first name when it's expecting an integer. I can do first name when it's expecting a string because those types align. If I were to do int num, then my cin would have to be a number, a literal number, to be stored because it is an integer. But in this case, we're utilizing a string of first name, and we're assigning it to nothing. And then after that, we are then going to use a cin call. This right here is called the extraction operator. This is used to grab items from the console and save it to the variable. And then this variable that we've already created is the first name variable. So we're going to do some comparing and contrasting of the cin and getline, but cin only grabs a small portion of the input, while the getline will grab the entire portion of the input. So again, we still need to utilize our include IO stream using namespace standard, and the getline is the console input for strings longer than one word. Okay, so this is used to read items from the user that are a first and last name. If it's separated by a space, anything that is separated by one space or more, you need to utilize the getline function instead of cin. Cin will only grab until the first white space. So that means until the first space that the user inputs. So if I were to input marine core and I were to use the cin feature, it's only going to grab marine. It does not grab the second word because it stops at white space. Getline, on the other hand, will grab everything in that line that the user inputs. So if I were to type United States Marine Corps, all separated by spaces, the getline would grab all of that. I could even write an entire sentence. I could write a paragraph. I could copy and paste a book, a full novel, and put it in there, and getline will grab the entire thing. So the way that that's used is, again, we have to create a string or whatever input you want it to be. Getlines could also be used for numbers, but in this case we're going to utilize a string, and we're going to call it full name. So full names are separated by spaces. So if it's Daniel space Walsh, then of course it's separated by a space, so we have to use the getline. If I were to input my full name with cin, then it would only grab my first name. So this will grab the entire string from the console and save it to a variable. Note that the getline will end at the new line character. So we're going to talk about this in some follow-on slides, but this is very important. And this is really confusing to some people. I've come across programmers that have been programming for 2 years and had no idea that this existed. They had no idea that a getline was a feature and the reason why we had to utilize getline or why they were having issues with it. And it's tricky because it's invisible to the user. The only way that you know it's there is because I'm telling you that it's there, and I'm going to give an example of how it's used. So cin versus getline. So cin is used to grab till the first white space, while getline will grab the entire transmission. Again, cin will only grab one word, and getline will grab all the contents. Now, this would be its proper implementation. So cin, extraction operator, the variable you want to save it to. And then for getline, you want to say getline, open parentheses, and then the cin feature with a comma, and then the variable you want to save it to. That would be cin versus getline. Now we're going to talk about the cin.ignore. This is where things can get a little bit tricky, and it's going to talk about that new line character that we were just talking about. So this is what is added at the end of a transmission, or I will call it a submission from the user. So let's say that I do a cout statement and I ask, what is your name? And then in my cin, it gives you an option to enter your first name. So yeah, the cout says, what is your first name? And then the cin is asking to only input your first name. What's going to happen is it's going to grab the first name that I input, which is Daniel. So it's going to grab Daniel and it's going to leave this new line character at the end. The cin feature does not grab the new line character because it stops at the first white space, and the white space exists before the new line character comes in. So the cin will grab everything before the new line character, and it will leave this new line character in what's called the buffer. The buffer is going to be all of the inputs. So it's like, think of it like a long line of inputs. Like you can have multiple inputs all lined up next to each other, and they can all be separated by spaces, and that would be the many sentences. And then at the end of all of that is going to be the new line character, and that just says that this is the end of the final transmission. The cin feature will always ignore the new line character. It doesn't ever see it, and it will completely ignore it. So when the user uses a cin, it'll grab the first white space, and it will leave the new line character in the buffer. So when a cin is used and then another cin is used, it'll still just grab till the first white space. It knows to ignore the new line character. Although the issue is the getline, it knows to stop at the new line character. So that's how the getline feature knows when it's done grabbing its entire sentence. Is it will continue to grab every single item until it reaches this new line. Until it reaches this new line character here. So once it sees this new line character, that's when it knows to stop grabbing all of its content. So whether that's one word, whether that's a million words, it will always grab them until it sees this feature. So the problem is the cin feature doesn't grab it. So it's leaving it in the buffer. So when I use a cin and then a couple lines later I go and use a getline, the getline is going to grab nothing. And the reason is because that very first item left in the buffer is this new line character. So you're expecting it to go and grab an entire sentence or input, whatever you want it to be, but it doesn't work that way. It's only going to grab, or it's going to grab nothing, because the first thing that it reads in the buffer is the new line character. So if we do not use the cin.ignore, then the getline will grab absolutely nothing. And it's because the first thing in the buffer is the new line character. So now let's give some little examples of this. So we're coding, and then we use a getline. And we're fine. There's no issues with using a getline. We do not need to use cin.ignore. After the getline, we go and use a cin. Again, we're fine. No issues yet. After the cin, we do another cin. Awesome. Still no issues. After cin, we use another cin. Great, no issues. Now, after this cin, we intend on using a getline. Now, in between my cin and my getline, I have to do cin.ignore. What the cin.ignore is going to do is it's going to erase the new line character. So it's going to it's gonna what we can call it flash the buffer. It's gonna delete everything that we currently have in there. That way, the next get line knows to grab the entire submission. It doesn't have a new line character sitting in the front of the buffer. So when you go from get line to get line, you're fine. When you go from get line to cin, you're fine. And now again, we want to go from cin to get line. In between those two transmissions, or in those two statements, I need to include a cin.ignore. So I want to walk through this one more time from the top. If I go from get line to cin, you're okay. If you go from cin to cin, you're okay. Again, if you go from cin to cin, you're okay. If you want to go from cin to getline, you have to include a cin.ignore. And if you go from getline to getline, you're fine. If you go from getline to cin, you're fine. Okay, now we want to get into some coding. And of course, we want to end every slide with ways that everyone can reach out. So again, if you need help, if you want additional help, questions, anything that you could think of, this is your opportunity to reach out. I can't stress this enough. I want to make sure that everyone's in good hands moving forward. So now let's get into our coding. So we want to create a new file. We will call it cin cout. So 1.3 cin cout getline. Want to make it a Mac. And then we'll just create the file and we'll call it like inputs.cpp, just something short to the point. Okay, so of course, so we're going to go through and do what we did last time. We're just going to write a bunch of comments, and then we're going to come in and code in between our comments. So first thing we want to do is include the input output library. Library. Wow, I can't spell today. R-A-R-Y, library. And then in that we'll do our using namespace standards. So, and then we want to use an int main is used to begin the program. Now let's print that we're going to use the cin and cout feature. Print. Sorry. After that, let's create some variables. So let's create variables to be used to hold name and rank. And then we'll ask user for input. User to enter their name, their last name, because we only want one input, or I only want one word. I don't want two words. Then we'll say ask user to input their rank, and then we'll do and then we'll greet them. So now we have their rank, we have their last name, so greet user. And then I want to show you how we'll purposefully break it. So I want to show an example of an incorrect use. So purposefully break the cin call. After that, let's do a first and last name. First and last name. So that's an example of using a space. Yeah, and we'll start with this. So, and then we'll add more at the end. So let's include our library. So the way we want to do that is we want to do pound include IO stream, and then we'll also do our using namespace standard. Using namespace standard. After that, let's get into our int main. Int main curly braces, and let's put all of this inside our int main. So first thing we want to do is, let's say, cout. We're getting ready to use the cin cout getline feature, exclamation points. And then I always like to do the endl because I want good spacing. Let's create some variables. So string last name, and then I'm going to assign it to nothing. That's always good practice. And then we'll do string rank and assign it to nothing. And then I actually want to show you guys something. So let's say I don't want to do 3 different lines all with 3 different things. So, and then we'll do a first and last name. Well, sure. First and last name. And then, of course, we assign it to nothing. So these are all in 3 different lines. But what if I want to make this all in one line? So that is absolutely a possibility. I can do it like this. And I just separate it by a comma. Now it's saying to create a string, and you're going to create 3 of them. So you're going to create last name, and you're going to assign it to nothing. And you're going to create a rank, assign it to nothing, and a first and last name, and assign it to nothing. All of those will be of type string. So if I were to save it and build it, I'm not going to play it or run it, or sure I can. It's just going to see out that, that we're getting ready to use this. But you can create strings this way if they're all of the same type. I can't create an integer this way in the string line. I'd have to create an int. But for spacing purposes, I just want it to look like this so it's easier for you guys to read for now. But that's just some tools for your toolbox, things that you can use later on, things that I'll definitely use later on for you guys. But that is a way where you can, you guys can see that less keystrokes can get the same thing done. So ask user to enter their name. So let's do a cout and enter your last name. And now we need to do a cin. So here I have 2 options. I could put a semicolon here, and now that means in the console that the user would put their last name here. So I'd put mine there like that. Or if I were to use the endl, now the user would be inputting on the next line. So it would look like that. So that's completely up to the user's preference, how you want your console over here to look like when you're displaying. I like doing a new line, so I'm going to do it like that. And now we need to do a cin. So cin, and now we're telling them to input their last name, and where do we want to save it? To the variable titled last name. So now it's telling the user to input their last name, and then it's expecting user input. It's expecting user input, which will hold their last name, and that will be stored in the last name variable. Now, same thing, ask the user to enter their rank. So we'll just copy this. Enter your rank. Oh, just had it. Enter your rank, and then here, enter their rank. So, first we tell them to enter their name, then we get the name entered, then we tell them to enter their rank, and then the rank is entered. And now we'll go ahead and we'll greet the user. So, let's do a cout, hello, space, and then we'll do rank. And then we'll do another space in there, just so we have some adequate spacing in between. I don't want name and rank to not have a space in between. Hello, rank, and last name. And we'll leave it at that, endl. Now, let's play this just so we can see what it exactly looks like. So we want to save it. We want to build it, and we want to play it. I'm going to move my console over down here so you guys can see that better. So we're getting ready to use the cin cout getline feature. So enter your last name, and now it's expecting user input. It's not going to continue any lines of code from here on out until after it gets user input. I'm going to minimize this. Maybe I can move my console back over here to the right. Yeah, that's enough room. So the reason is we're going to have a lot more code down here, and I want you guys to be able to see it the whole time. So enter your last name. So I'll do that, Walsh. And now I have to hit enter. So when I hit enter, that is entering that new line character. So enter. And now it's asking for the next input. Enter your rank. And I'm going to put SGT. And that works. Now, hello, Sergeant Walsh. Okay, so we're good. Now let's purposefully break the cin call. So let's say cout enter your first and last name. So because I'm asking for the first and last name, I am expecting a space in between this. So for me, and I'm also only putting a C in. So we're going to get a good example of it only grabbing the first name and not the last name. So first and last name. And then let's display it. Cout, here's your first name, even though you were expecting both names. And then we'll do haha. And then we'll close it, and we want to do an end, or we'll add it. So first and last name, and then we'll do an endl, a new line. And let's give it just a little bit more room over here so you guys can see all that. And now let's play it. So we want to save, build, and run. So the first thing it's going to ask is for your last name, Walsh. Your rank, SGT. Hello there, Sergeant Walsh. Enter your first and last name, Daniel space Walsh. Now, we are expecting, just by the way that everything's looking on the right side, so if I didn't have any knowledge of the code here, you would expect that it's going to grab the first and last name if our logic were to check out. But when I hit enter, the cin feature is only going to grab the name Daniel. It's going to see that there is a white space right here, and it's done. It has done its job. It grabbed to the first white space, and it left all of this in the buffer. So all of this still sits in the buffer, but it hasn't been grabbed yet. So for instance, if I were to do another cin call down here, down in this vicinity, you would notice that even though you would want a user input, it would already be sufficient because it would go and grab the next user input from the console. Now that all sounds a little difficult, so we'll walk through that. So I'm going to hit enter, and here's your first name even though you were expecting both, haha. And of course it only entered my last name. So right now this program has Walsh sitting in the buffer. It is yet to be grabbed and it's just sitting there. So if I were to create a new variable up here, let's just create a string new var. Yeah, my naming convention is bad, I already understand. And then we're going to do cin new var, and then we'll display new var, cout new var, endl. Now let's do the same thing. And we're going to notice that without ever inputting anything, without ever telling it, hey, input some information here, it's going to go and already grab it. And my computer's running awfully slow right now. So I saved it, and let's build it. I'm sorry, let's run it. Enter your last name, Walsh. Enter your rank, Sergeant. Enter your first and last name, Daniel space Walsh. So we're going to hit enter. After we hit enter here, it's going to save Daniel into this. It's going to leave the space in the Walsh in the buffer. And then this new var character, because the next cin is going to grab what's left in the buffer being Walsh. So that's what it's going to display. So without ever, even though there's a cin call right here, it's not ever going to actually take user input because it's going to grab what's previously left in the buffer. So come over here and we hit enter. So again, here's your first name, even though you were expecting both names, haha, and then here's the first input that it grabbed, and then what's left in the buffer is displayed here. So that's an example of showing what was left in the buffer. Now, let's fix it just a little bit. Let's get rid of all of this. We don't need that. Now let's do first and last name. Or let's just ask just for first name. First name entry. And we'll do a cout. Well, first we need to grab a first name, so let's do a, okay, yeah, we can do it like that. Cout, enter your first name. enter your first name. And L. And then let's do a cin first name. Let's come up here and let's add a first name, and let's set it to nothing. Then come back over here. So now it's going to grab a first name, and then we'll go cout. Here's the first name of a loser. And then we want to do first name. And L. Awesome. And now let's go in and let's also do some, let's do something that requires a get line. So now I want to show an example of a cin versus a get line. So let's do cout, name of the best NBA player ever, and L, and then we'll want to use a get line, cin, and we'll call it, I'm going to call it GOAT, greatest of all time. There is only one right answer there, so I hope you guys are on the same page with me on that one. And we'll go GOAT, space is going to be the GOAT. Now we need to create the variable of GOAT. So I can create it anywhere I want it up here. I'm going to put it right here. So I go comma, GOAT equals, oops, and we will save it. So let's add some comments in here to clean it up. Name of a loser and greatest of all time. That's a GOAT. So we are not using a cin.ignore. So I want you guys to see what this program looks like without us utilizing what we should be. So enter your last name, Walsh. Enter your rank, Sergeant. Oh, Sergeant Walsh. Enter your first and last name, Daniel Walsh. Well, I should probably just be entering my first name. So we're right here. It is entering first and last name. I am putting a space in between. So what's going to happen is Daniel is going to get assigned here. And then it's going to display enter your first name. But what's going to happen is it's going to put my last name. So actually, I could clean this up a little bit. And I could, whatever. It's going to assign last name into this cin. So by looking at this, you would expect it to have an output and then receive an input from the user. The problem is there is already input left in the buffer. So first and last name is going to grab Daniel, and then first name is going to grab Walsh, and then it's going to give me an opportunity to have this cout statement of here's the name of a loser. So we'll hit enter. And now it says enter your first name, and it went and grabbed Walsh. So here's the first name of a loser. Luckily that's not my first name, so that doesn't make sense. That wouldn't make me a loser. And Walsh was inputted here. Name of the best NBA player. And what happened is it's displaying something back to the user, but what it grabbed was just a new line character. So as long as I do not use my Cin Ignore statement, now we can do it here, which is cin.ignore, and then open and close, oh, sorry. Man, I'm riddled with mistakes. And then we play it, and now we're going to do the exact same thing, and we're going to notice that it's going to, this time, allow me to give an input for the greatest. I've never seen it run this slow. My computer's been fighting me all day today. So, Walsh is my last name. Sergeant is the rank. Hello, Sergeant Walsh. Enter your first and last name. Daniel Walsh. Again, I'm purposefully breaking this. If I were to just do one input here, then it would grab one input here and one input here. Although, I am allowing it to have dual inputs, and these dual inputs gives one input here and one input there. We will fix this at the end for our final go through when I put it onto GitHub, but I just want to show you guys all how it works. So, again, Daniel's going to be assigned here, Walsh is going to be assigned here, and then it's going to tell me the first name of a loser, and it's going to display my last name. Now, after it did this, it then did a Cin.Ignore, so it flashed the buffer, and it got rid of all the new line characters that the Cin has left. So that has just been ignored. Now it's coming here to this Cout statement. Name of the best NBA player ever, and that requires a Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And the GOAT is MJ, Michael Jordan. And if you don't agree with that, then stop watching these because you are stupid. Now, let's go through and let's clean this up. So we say enter your first and last name. How about we just have them enter your first name? And I'm going to, actually now we have that twice. So I'm going to get rid of this altogether. And now I just got rid of a variable of the first and last name, so I can get rid of this variable just because it's not being used, just to clean everything up. So, first name entry is enter your first name, and it's going to go and grab the first name. Here's the first name of a loser, so that just means I can't input my name because I don't want to be called a loser. And then we still have our Cin.Ignore, which is going to flash the buffer and get rid of all the new line characters that we have, which makes it possible for us to use our Getline. Once we get this running and this works, we will conclude our video. So we want to build it and we want to save it. And I hope your computer is not being as slow as mine. This is ridiculous. I've never seen it be this slow before. Walsh is the last name. Rank, I'll put something different. We'll make it a Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major Walsh. Ha. Yeah, right. First name. So I don't want to enter my first name because I don't want to call myself a loser. So I have a friend, and we'll call him a loser. His name is William. William is the loser. And name of the greatest NBA player. So we already did Jordan, so we'll go to the next best player. Second greatest basketball player of all time is, of course, legend himself, Larry Bird. So second GOAT is Larry Bird. So this would be an example of our Cins, of our Couts, of our Getlines, and our Cin.Ignore. I hope that this was very clear and this made sense. I'll be posting this exact code I have here, and I'll put it onto GitHub. That way you guys can play around with this. You can edit it a little bit. But I hope this makes sense, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you.